Okay, so guys, welcome back to another video. This is a bit of a different video. Well, it's one in which I've done every year for the past, I believe, 2 years. I think this is the third year of me doing it now, and it's 10 boxing fights that I want to see in 2025. Obviously, we have just gone into the new year, so happy new year to everybody. And yeah, like I say, this is a video in which I always enjoy doing. I'm going to do a UFC one as well, which I always do. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So like I said, these are 10 fights, just my opinion. If I'm missing any, let me know in the comments below. If you disagree with any and you'd rather see somebody else fight somebody else, then again let me know. And like I say, starting off, number one, I feel like, to be honest, it's quite an obvious one, but maybe coming off 2024, it's a fight in which the hype has maybe decreased a bit and the actual stock value of the fight has decreased a bit, but I still think for British boxing, and as a British boxing fan, it's a huge fight that does have to happen at some point in their careers, that being Fury versus Joshua. It's been talked about for countless years now, for donkey's years now, really. And so there's been many a times in which you thought perhaps this time it's going to happen, perhaps it was a bit close, and perhaps, they're actually agreeing to make the fight, they want the fight to happen. It's just never really seemingly happened. Like I say now, I think it's probably in a better position to happen than ever before. Obviously, we have Riyadh season involved now, and His Excellency. In general, he's probably going to be likely to make any of these dream fights, to be completely honest. But like I say, I think in the past, since His Excellency has come into boxing, it's all been about Fury versus Usyk. Now that ship has sailed, really, seemingly they're not going to do a trilogy for the moment. Perhaps they might do down the line if Fury is to beat Joshua and Usyk is to beat Dubois. Perhaps there might be a trilogy, but I mean, to be fair, I thought that the rematch was a very close fight between Fury and Usyk, but nonetheless, it seems like that ship sailed. Like I was saying in my prediction for Fury versus Usyk, Fury always had that backup of the Joshua fight, and Joshua obviously got badly beaten up and badly knocked out from Dubois, and perhaps shown that he just can't fight in front of the lights, can't fight around the crowds in front of the people. This fight will be a huge fight. It's probably, hopefully, going to be in the UK, and it will most definitely sell at Wembley. It's perhaps going to be the same thing again of Joshua might crumble under the lights, but I feel like he has a lot less pressure for this fight. I think Fury has perhaps a bit more expectation upon him as the favourite. Joshua, coming off the loss, doesn't really have too much to lose, to be completely honest, and I think he is being smart. I think he said that there was an injury and things like that. Perhaps there was an injury, but I also think at the same time he's been deliberately waiting around for this opportunity for the Fury fight, because he's probably been told that if he waits around it's going to happen, and it's probably going to be a fight for no belt, but it's still going to be a huge fight. And like I say, I feel like Fury is still boxing very well. Like I say, I thought he improved and looked a lot better in that last fight versus Usyk, and I think if he is to fight Joshua, he might have to fight a bit of a different way. I'm not too sure if the same strategy can be used to fight Joshua than it is to fight Usyk, because they are two completely different fighters. But like I mentioned, I feel like this fight now is actually going to happen. They are both on the latter stages of their career. Perhaps they're both past their best. It's sad to see that it didn't happen in a time in which they were both champion and they were both riding highs and they were both just doing so well in their careers. But I mean, that's been boxing. That's His Excellency's come in, but even that can't change things. That there is things like this in boxing where fights are just still taking too long. Hopefully, it's going to be less now with His Excellency involved, but I feel like this fight next year is going to happen. His Excellency says he wants it. He says he wants Usyk Dubois. He says he wants Fury Joshua. Normally, from the way that things are going at the moment, unless he's working with Canelo, what he says is normally what he gets. And so, like I say, I feel like Fury versus Joshua finally will be able to happen in 2025. And as a fan, I'm still going to be so invested for the build-up and everything like that, and so here for the fight, no matter what record, to be completely honest. Moving on. Second fight, Inoue versus Nakatani. Nakatani has had a brilliant year, really cemented himself as a top-ranked favourite, a headliner in which has been offering some great performances in 2024, some great stoppages, some really clean, crisp performances. And, Inoue at the same time as well has had another year where he's developed more, progressed more, looked even more sensational, won even more fights, coming off a great win realistically versus TJ Doheny, where he really did just kind of beat him up. And if he's able to do the same thing again versus Sam Goodman, there was talks about Inoue versus Nakatani wanting to be on the same card in like May, April time, and then that to kind of set up after that to then go on to set up Inoue Nakatani by the end of next year, or this year now, 2025, in November, December time. And Nakatani, of course, has to move up in weight. Inoue seemingly might still be moving up in weight and going into the featherweight division, but we're not really too sure what's happening with that at the moment. Is he going to move up into featherweight? It's not been talked about actually too much in recent times from Inoue. It seemed like he was kind of keen to do it after a couple of fights, but if he doesn't do it after this Goodman fight, then he might as well wait for this Nakatani fight, because I'm sure he knows the presence in which Nakatani brings and the fans in which he brings and the attention from Japanese boxing that he brings. And this definitely could be the biggest Japanese boxing fight probably of all time, and it would be a crazy big fight, and it would be a fight in which would definitely get so many eyes on the lower weight divisions, in which, to be fair, 2024 did very well and was very nice to see these eyes getting put on the lower weight divisions. But I feel like it could happen even more, and I feel like this fight is the biggest fight. And perhaps, there's talks about something like a Jesse Bam Rodriguez going up and fighting Inoue, but I just think perhaps for the moment, weight-wise, it's not really something that's too practical, or in my opinion, is going to happen. But Nakatani Inoue definitely could happen, and like I say, it wouldn't surprise me if it does. It's just going to be interesting to see if Nakatani wants to go down the route of undisputed. He's going to have to be a lot of champions to be undisputed, because of course they are individual champions and they're all Japanese fighters. They're all going to be very tough tests, and I just don't know if I necessarily see all them fights happening, or if he wants to chase a big fight versus Inoue. Moving on now to my third pick. This is gonna be where the winner of a fight in which is announced, I want to fight somebody else, basically. So Optaia versus Nika versus Ramirez. Obviously, Optaia is the clear favourite. Nika is coming in on short notice, and he is fighting in front of a bit more of a home crowd, but it's a great fight in my opinion. I think it's actually a better fight than what was originally announced, Optaia versus Sin Cara. I think this is a much better fight against a young opponent who's really eager to prove himself. I think it's going to be a tough test. Obviously, depending on when you watch this, the fight might have already happened, but it's not until next week, I believe. And so, if Optaia is able to get through that, Optaia is just kind of destroying everybody at the moment. He's been talked about possibly going and fighting Usyk. If Usyk beats Dubois again, then Usyk really doesn't have too much to achieve really left in the heavyweight division. People are talking about Martin McCauley, but he's not really ready yet to move straight into a world title fight. I don't think he's deserving of one yet after the Anderson win. He needs to get another win himself. But Optaia, I'm sure he'd love the Usyk fight, but as a fight, I think the Zurdo Ramirez fight is an excellent fight. Ramirez is coming off a great fight versus Billam Smith, which was a very tough, grueling fight, which we kind of expected it is any time that Chris Billam Smith fights. But nonetheless, it was an outclassing performance in the end by Ramirez, and I think Ramirez is really cemented himself as a cruiserweight world champion and has been excellent. I mean, the way he dismantled Goulamirian was a great performance, and he's really on a good run. And Optaia, of course, is on an excellent run himself. That is a collision course in which I need to see happen. If Optaia is going to move up to heavyweight, I want to see this fight happen before that. So perhaps Optaia versus Usyk could still happen at heavyweight. Perhaps it could happen at cruiserweight if Usyk moves back down. But I want to see Optaia versus Ramirez first, and that's a fight in which I'm eager for 2025, if, of course, he beats Nika. Moving on now to my fourth fight, being Bivol versus Beterbiev. The winner of that versus Benavidez versus Morel. I think, again, that's an excellent fight. You could have staked the claim for Canelo versus Beterbiev or Canelo versus Bivol too. I mean, of course, everybody wanted to see Canelo versus Benavidez as well. And so, there were options there, but I just don't see Canelo realistically moving up to the light heavyweight division, because he seemingly doesn't want to work with His Excellency, I just don't see his fights happening in the light heavyweight division. I'm just not sure. I think the division with these four names is strong enough to create a few fights there. I think Canelo is going to struggle for a top fight at the moment. I've not mentioned him in this list because I just don't think there are options that are quite there available, which are really standout fights. The Crawford one's not going to happen anymore, to be honest. I'm quite glad of that, to be honest. Pacheco and Bealey, they're the kind of two big fights, the two big names, but they're not standout fights that are really going to make fans really interested. So, they could have gone on to fight in one of these light heavyweights, but I would much prefer, in my opinion, to see the winner of Bivol versus Beterbiev versus the winner of Benavidez-Morel. I think Benavidez-Morel is a great fight. It's surprising to see it happen. It's surprising to see that they're really risking Morel and, risking Benavidez. It's a tough fight for both. It's a low reward type fight for both, realistically, because, they're both taking a big risk taking this fight. But like I say, credit to them for taking the fight, and I think if they are to win, the winner of that, it was already ordered, I believe, to fight the winner of Beterbiev Bivol 2. So hopefully, if it all goes ahead, all these fights, I heard rumours of Beterbiev versus Bivol maybe getting pushed back, I'm not too sure. But if that doesn't happen and it all goes ahead, I would like to see the winner of Bivol versus Beterbiev 2 versus the winner of Benavidez versus Morel. And like I say, that puts the light heavyweight division at a bit better of a point, because it has been held up a little bit by these two fights versus Bivol and Beterbiev. It's kind of stopped some like Benavidez really being able to get this opportunity, but it's meant that he's had to fight Morel, and so I suppose in the end it is a good thing. Moving on to my fifth position, I've got Davis versus Stevenson. I think it's a fight in which a lot of people have been calling for quite a while now and really wanting to see for quite a while, and Stevenson's had another year in which he's not done loads. He's won once or twice, I'm not too certain, but they're not against big names. He was meant to fight Williams Zepeda as a fight, but then Williams Zepeda is now seemingly going to fight Tevin Farmer in a rematch. If Zepeda beats Farmer more convincingly, perhaps the Stevenson fight happens, but Stevenson was also meant to fight Cordina, and that obviously didn't happen as well, and so it's not been the best of year. He retired for a bit as well, Stevenson, and so, yeah, like I say, it's not been the best of years for him. But Davis, coming off the Frank Martin destruction, has this fight with Lamont Roach. He said on his story that it's cancelled. Is that actually true? I'm not too sure. But if he's able to either fight Lamont Roach or not fight Lamont Roach, if he's able to beat Lamont Roach or just not fight him, that fight versus Stevenson still is really there. I'm sure His Excellency would like to get involved and really kind of make that fight happen. Stevenson would be keen to work with His Excellency, but I'm just not too sure as a PBC fighter if Davis is wanting to work with His Excellency. Nonetheless, it's still a fight in which everybody wants to see. Davis has said this 2025 is perhaps his last year in boxing. So if it's his last year in boxing, you'd like to think that he's going to be really chasing these big fights, and you'd like to hope that is the case. And so hopefully that fight is to happen next. And I feel like that's a fight in which is going to be probably one of the toughest fights for Davis stylistic-wise, because Davis often kind of prides upon mistakes and things like that, and Stevenson doesn't make much defensive errors. People have been really going at him for being way too defensive, but he's getting the job done and he's winning fights, and so you can't really discredit that. Perhaps he would come into a Davis fight a bit more aggressive. I don't think that would go in his favour if he did do that, but I think, like I say, it would be the toughest test for Davis available to him. In saying he's been so destructive, I would like to see that tough test. And moving on to Crawford versus Ennis. Of course, it's the fight in which has been talked about for a while. I've been really wanting it. Crawford was gonna fight Canelo, then he wasn't going to fight Canelo, then he was going to fight Fundora, now Fundora is seemingly going to fight Spence Jr., and so I'm not too sure what's happening with Crawford. His career's kind of been put on hold. He came off a tough fight versus Madrimov, and it was a tough fight, and he had to really kind of show his skill and show his level against an opponent in which a lot of fans weren't giving credit to, and weren't expecting to be able to do as well as he did. Full credit to Madrimov for how well he performed, but Crawford, I just don't think he has any other bigger fights other than the Ennis fight. Ennis, pretty much every single fight in which he's been talked about fighting against, he's just fallen through every single time. I don't know if that's him asking for too much money. I don't know if he's difficult to work with. I don't know if he's just getting unlucky. But every single time it's seemingly falling through. He must be getting so frustrated with everything. I mean, just recently I believe there was talks with him versus Teofimo Lopez. Now Teofimo is going to fight Matias seemingly. So, like I say, it's just every single time there is an opportunity, it's seemingly getting shut down, and Ennis deserves that big fight. I mean, he had a tough fight versus Chikadze in that second time around, and I feel like the frustration is getting to him, and I think he is thinking that he can just walk through these lower level guys because he is wanting these big fights and really thinking that they should be happening. Hopefully Crawford Ennis happens next year. Like I say, I feel like with his ex-UFC involved, it could happen. Crawford's, been on and headlined that Vegas Riyadh season card, and so perhaps a fight versus Ennis could happen. Hopefully it would, and it is a huge fight, and yeah, like I say, probably the biggest fight realistically available for Crawford at the moment. Moving on to my seventh one, which is a bit more of a fun fight than anything. It's a fight in which I think stylistic wise, it's just two guys in which make for a great matchup, and that's Ola Skugga versus Yafai. Like I say, I think it's an excellent fight. Perhaps Yafai might need one more fight before then, but Yafai is coming off a destructive performance versus Sonny Edwards. Yes, it's a Sonny Edwards in which realistically was depleted after the first couple of rounds and didn't really want to be in the fight after the first couple of rounds, as he said. But it was still a very destructive performance, and he showed that aggressive style, and it was his best performance yet against high-level opposition. Ola Skugga, even though I believe he is in the lower weight division by light flyweight, he's been looking excellent. Obviously he had the loss versus Taraji, but he also has that aggressive style as well, where he's just going to let his hands go, but he has that power as well, similar to that of VFI. I think if Ola Skugga is to move up, that fight versus VFI would be a great fight to make, and I'm sure Eddie Hearn, or at least I hope Eddie Hearn's looking at a fight like that, and perhaps thinking stylistic wise that would make for an excellent, fun, aggressive fight where two small guys are just going at it. And Ola Skugga obviously had that fight versus Bomba Gonzalez last time, and it went to a no contest. Bomba Gonzalez is known to be difficult to work with, so I'm just not even too sure if that fight's going to happen again. So they're going to be looking for options for Ola Skugga. Perhaps, like I say, a fight with Yafai could happen, and it would be a fight in which I'd personally love to see. As a fan, I think it would just make for such an entertaining contest, and that would be perhaps that Japanese kind of, obviously Ola Skugga is not from Japan, but he fights a lot of the time in Japan in recent times, and perhaps that would be that push your fight needs to kind of get into that market, and I feel like that market definitely is hard for British fighters to get into, and I think that definitely could happen with that fight, and like I say, just personally for me, that would be a great fight, and a fight in which I'd be really invested in seeing. Moving on now to my 8th position, and my first women's fight, and that being the winner of Price versus Jonas, which is an excellent fight in which I'm very, very glad to see it being made, versus Mayer. Obviously, Mayer had that win versus Sandy Ryan, in which was a very resilient win. She was coming off the loss versus Jonas, which was a controversial loss, and a lot of people disagreed with the scorecards and thought that she was hard done to Mayer. And Jonas, if she is able to beat Price, it's going to be a very tough ask, but if she is, I'm sure she would only realistically want that fight versus Mayer. I think she is obviously 40 years of age now, and so I'm sure she's going to be wanting only the top contenders, and that's why I respect her a lot for taking this fight versus Price, and I think the whole card's going to be great in general, a full women's card, but like I say, I think it's going to be a very tough ask for Jonas to be able to beat Price. If she does, the Mayer fight is there, set up, ready made. If she doesn't, I mean, Mayer would be more than willing to go and fight Price, I'm sure, and go on to even come over to the UK again and be on a show, even though she got hard done to last time. I'm sure she'd be willing to go on a boxer show in the UK, and Price, perhaps it could be in Wales. Price is looking excellent at the moment. She's coming off an excellent win last time out, a stoppage win, an impressive stoppage win, and Jonas is also coming off a good performance. I think she looked much better versus Habazin than she did in the Mayer fight, to be honest, and I think that was a good fight. So I feel like the Price-Jonas fight is still going to be a good fight. I don't think it's going to be a clear one-way win by Price, but it's going to be a very tough ask for Jonas to win, of course, like I mentioned. And yeah, like I said, Mayer finally getting the nod in ways in the scorecards and getting a good win versus Sandy Ryan. It was a close fight. Perhaps we'll see the rematch with that. I'm not too sure. Ryan had the whole thing happen with the paint getting thrown on her and all the distractions during fight week, and even, well, that was on fight night, I believe. And so perhaps the rematch might happen. But Maia, after getting hard done to in the Baumgartner fight with those scores and hard done to versus Jonas with the scores, it was nice to see her get the scorecards, the judges go her way for that Sandy Ryan fight, even though it was a very close fight and it could have realistically gone either way. And so, yeah, like I said, that would be a fight. Either of them two versus Maia is an excellent fight. I think the welterweight division in women's boxing is looking excellent at the moment, and Sandy Ryan is still there floating about, and perhaps even if she's waiting around for a little bit, or if she goes and has a little bit of an easier fight and comes back and waits to see the results of all these fights, she can go back into a world title fight, I'm sure, by the end of next year, I'm sure. And then moving on to my ninth position, I've got Forsand versus Johnson versus Hughes 2. So the winner of that, obviously, that fight hasn't been announced yet, Johnson versus Hughes 2. It's been talked about heavily. From what it seems, it's pretty much guaranteed it's going to happen. When, I'm not too sure. Perhaps in May time. It's seemingly a date in which pretty much every fighter gives for when they're going to fight at the start of the year. But like I say, it seems like that fight is going to happen. It might be in March time. Hopefully it does happen, because Johnson managed to get the win, of course. Hughes thought she was very much hard done to, and it was a very close fight. And I would love to see, them go at it again and see who actually is the clear winner. And then Forsand, I feel like she has to get into the market of the bigger fights. She is a great talent, a great champion. She's cemented herself as a great champion and has been on another very good run of title defences again this year, but she's just not testing herself the same way against the other champions. I feel like that has to happen now. The Bella Entertainments were talking about doing a tournament with the women's fighters and getting her involved in it, amongst many others, including Hughes and Johnson as well. But is that actually happening? I'm not too sure. That's seemingly gone a bit quiet. So I feel like Forsand has to leave Denmark and, or, have a fighter like Hughes. I'm sure they'd go to Denmark to fight her, or Johnson would go to Denmark to fight her. She just needs to fight another champion, I think, and I think it's about time, to be completely honest, and that will really show her level, because I do think she is a very hidden talent and is a great world champion, but like I say, a very hidden world champion. I feel like that talent needs to be shown. Hopefully it will, and hopefully she'll get a big fight in this year. And we'll move on now to my final fight, my 10th fight, and that is Dubois versus Ferreira. Will this happen? I'm not too sure. If His Excellency gets involved and makes more women's fights, then perhaps this fight would happen. If he doesn't, I'm not too sure. It seems like Boxer and the relationship with Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren is still not the best with Ben Shalom. It seems like they still have the disagreements, and I don't know if that means they're going to be more willing to make fights or not. It's been ordered, from what I believe. Dubois has a fight versus Sin Cara. Obviously, she has to win that fight, not Sin Cara. I've forgotten the name of the opponent, my apologies. But she has to, of course, win that fight and then be able to progress through. If she does, which she's expected to do, then the Ferreira fight is just an excellent fight. I think it's, again, two aggressive styles, two Olympians going at it. I think it's just an excellent fight. Ferreira's had another great year, coming off a great win just at the end of the year on that Monte Carlo Matchroom show. And so, just for my want, I would love to see that happen. I think it's the biggest fight in the division to happen in the lightweight division. And it should happen. It just makes sense. But like I said, it's just whether or not Boxer are going to be willing to work with Matchroom. If it gets ordered, perhaps it might happen. Or like I say, if His Excellency wants to make another women's fight, perhaps that will happen. But he's only made one so far. Like I say, we'll have to wait and see. But I feel like Caroline Dubois isn't getting enough attention as what she deserves. But neither is Beatriz Ferreira. I feel like they're both slowly getting built up on undercards, even though they are both world champions, but they both need to fight each other to make that big fight, make the eyes on them and the attention on them. And I would just love to see it happen as a huge fight. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like I said, there's going to be a UFC one out probably tomorrow, if not the next day. And so yeah, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video. And thanks for watching.